The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 32. Cavities and Cabinets. Mid-November 1996. To his utmost disbelief, Richard soon found himself in brainstorming sessions with the eager Quentin Jugson. In the middle of November, not long after Richard had performed surgery on Dumbledore's index finger, he was cloistered in a small parlour in Malfoy Manor, seated with the indefatigable young wizard. The man produced splashy storyboards of television adverts, mock-ups of magazine spreads, even plans for sponsorships, with Saracens, a women's rugby premiership club. Richard stared at all of it, mouth agape. "Sorry to interrupt, Jugson, but, where did you learn to do all of this? When and where did you learn about adverts and sponsorships?" Jugson reddened in bashfulness. "May I speak honestly, sir?" "Of course." "I was a half-blood Slytherin, and I got caught up in the excitement surrounding the Dark Lord with several others in my year. I was 13 when I first heard the stories about him, and they were the stuff of legend. I finished at Hogwarts and took the Dark Mark in late September of 1981. The Dark Lord disappeared a month later. Never met him in person, and I had not performed any missions for him, so I was acquitted with only probation." Richard nodded, encouraging Jugson to continue. "After the first Wizarding War was over, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. My grandfather was Muggle-born, and he suggested his alma mater, a Muggle university. I chose advertising on a whim, and found that I really enjoyed it." "So, let me understand this. You're a half-blood, with a Muggle-born grandfather. You attended a Muggle university, and yet, somehow, you still became a Death Eater?" Richard knew his face was a mask of incredulity, but he did not know how else to approach this. "You have to understand, being a half-blood in Slytherin made me a target, even amongst those in my house. I felt as though I had to prove that I belonged, and the things we were being told were very whitewashed, if you will. Yes, he espoused pure-blood rhetoric, but he also presented the idea of a utopian synergy between the magical and mundane worlds. To an outsider looking in, it didn't seem so bad. I only realized what it truly was once it was too late. All of my friends had already joined, and they intimated that I would be hunted down if I didn't as well." Jugson dropped his head in his hands and rubbed at his sandy blonde hair in despair. "Why did you tell me all of this?" Richard asked in confusion. I don't know. I suppose it was the fact that you were raised as a Muggle, that you have experience in the Muggle world. Sometimes, listening to you speak, it's easy to forget that you are the Dark Lord's cousin." Jugson looked up fearfully. "I suppose you plan to kill me now?" Richard sighed deeply. "Now is no time to die, Jugson. I cannot fault you for a decision you made as a teenager." At Jugson's look of relief, Richard pressed him. "But I do need for you to tell me this. If you had to do it over again, if you could go back and tell that 13-year-old boy what you know now, would you make the same decision and join the Death Eaters?" "Salazar, no." Jugson looked skyward, an anguished expression on his face. "Merlin, why am I telling you all this? I'm just digging my own grave, aren't I?" "Not with me. You can trust me," Richard said. "I won't say a word about any of this to the Dark Lord." Jugson looked as though he could not believe his luck. "You really won't?" "No. You and I are not so different, Jugson." Jugson gave him an appraising look. "Do you really plan to create a pyramid scheme to entrap Muggles?" Richard sighed heavily. The younger man had just poured out a heartfelt confession to him. Richard wasn't about to show his entire hand to the man. He seemed trustworthy, but Richard did not know him that well yet. Still, this small confession did not seem so bad, in light of what Jugson had told him. "Not really. I just thought it might be funny. My cousin seems the type to fixate on, let us say, unusual things. I don't particularly relish the idea of killing a bunch of people, and this seemed like a good distraction." Jugson nodded in comprehension, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I quite agree. But will you do me this favour? I know you suggested Fixer Elixir as a bit of a lock, but it really could be something. Would you help me make a real go of the Fixer Elixir?" Richard closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "All right. But no pyramid scheme, all right? Just a straight, legitimate business." Jugson stuck out a hand to shake. And that was how Richard Granger became the reluctant chief executive officer of Fixer Elixir Limited, one of the first energy drinks in the English market. Early December 1996. The Fixer Elixir, however, wasn't Voldemort's only focus that late autumn. Early in December he told the group at large his plans for Hogwarts, and Albus Dumbledore. There were several surprised looks that passed among the group when the Dark Lord announced that Richard's and Lucius's children had been assigned the task of killing the headmaster. Bellatrix was nearly apoplectic with rage at being left out of this decision. "My lord, do you really believe that these two children are capable of carrying out this plan?" Lucius looked thunderous. "How dare you question my son's resolve?" "He was part of the group that came to the Department of Mysteries just summer last," Bellatrix yelled hotly. "As an infiltrator, an interloper in Potter's little group," Lucius hissed. "Draco and Miss Granger have been working tirelessly to gain Potter's trust, and that of Albus Dumbledore's, and now the spoils of their labour have nearly come to fruition, and you dare doubt them?" "Enough!" Voldemort shouted. Bellatrix and Lucius cowed automatically at the sound. "I have complete confidence in both young Malfoy and in Miss Granger. Their parentage, if nothing else, indicates that they come from loyal and capable stock." Bellatrix, if possible, looked even angrier, but shut her mouth. "My lord, I pledge to you that Draco will remain steadfast in his loyalties." Lucius bowed to the Dark Lord. Voldemort nodded and turned to Richard. "And what say you, Richard? Do you feel that your daughter can do what is asked of her?" "I have supreme confidence in my daughter, that she will do the right thing," Richard affirmed. "Well, I suppose we shall see, then," Bellatrix said nastily. "And I, for one, intend to see it happen." Early January 1997. Dumbledore's office was filled with a low hubbub of discussion. Professors Dumbledore, Snape, and McGonagall were seated with Lupin, Tonks, and Sirius Black. Richard, Draco, and Hermione rounded out the group. Richard cleared his throat. "A new wrinkle has developed that we weren't counting on. Voldemort told the group at large that the children have been assigned the task. Bellatrix and a few others plan to come to the school to see it happen, to bear witness to it. I'll make every effort to join their team." "They plan to break into the school?" Tonks asked with wide eyes. "That would be difficult," Sirius said, I can tell you. If I had not been able to transform into a dog, it would have been impossible to get into Hogwarts a few years back." "Precisely. Likely they expect myself and Draco to grant them passage," Snape intoned. "But it's common knowledge that security has been stepped up at the school," Tonks said. "We've got Aurors doing round-the-clock patrols, inside and outside of the school, as well as in the village of Hogsmeade. They won't be able to just knock on the gates and walk in without a fight." "That is why we're going to use an old black family heirloom to get them inside," Dumbledore said, eyes twinkling. Draco, Sirius, and Tonks all looked at him, startled. "Draco, perhaps you remember your old Quidditch teammate, Grant Montague?" "Right," Draco nodded. "He got himself in some kind of trouble last year, and disappeared for a while. Didn't he somehow manage to apparate and splinch himself in a toilet?" "Correct," said Dumbledore. "We're going to have them splinch themselves in a toilet?" Hermione asked, alarmed. "No," Dumbledore smiled. "Grant Montague, you see, was trapped inside of a vanishing cabinet. That vanishing cabinet is still here, on the grounds of Hogwarts, the one that he was trapped in. However, it has a twin. There is another one located in a shop in Nocturne Alley. It once belonged to Phineas Nigellus Black, a former headmaster at Hogwarts." Dumbledore pointed a bit behind him at a painting of a disgruntled man who looked vaguely like Sirius. "I don't appreciate you nicking my valuable possessions for your harebrained schemes, Dumbledore," the painting's occupant groused. "You'll shut your knob, gobbler, if you know what's good for you," Sirius growled. He was rather familiar with his particularly rude ancestor, as the man's other painting still graced the walls at Black House. "Padfoot," admonished Lupin, resting a hand on his friend's knee. "You don't know the lengths that this man goes to annoy me, on nights that you spend at Tonks's place." Dumbledore quelled Sirius's annoyance with a kindly look, then filled in the group on the passage that could be created using the vanishing cabinets. "There's only one major difficulty. The cabinet we have in our possession is broken, owing to being dropped by Peeves the poltergeist some years ago. That's the reason that Montague wasn't able to simply exit the cabinet after he was forced inside." "Can you fix it?" Richard asked. "It's a very complex process, a highly sensitive bit of magic," Professor McGonagall offered. "It's possible, but it won't be easy. And it's for that reason that we feel that Mr. Malfoy and Miss Granger should take on this assignment themselves." "Sorry, what?" Draco asked. Lupin was nodding thoughtfully. "Yes, a very good idea, Minerva." Draco looked more worried. "Why do you think it's a good idea that we perform this repair? You're talking about creating a passageway for people to come through. What if we get it wrong and someone dies?" Dumbledore leaned forward in his seat and folded his fingers in front of him. The flickering candlelight glinted off of his gold finger. "I have the utmost confidence in you, Mr. Malfoy. You will need to tell Voldemort through your fathers about the cabinet. Your father knows the Montagues, and likely knew the details of his ordeal. And as a member of the Board of Governors, he was aware of when the artifact was broken. It will seem suspicious if the cabinet is suddenly fixed perfectly and ready to be used. If you explain that you are repairing the cabinet in secret, Lucius will be more assured of your loyalty to this task." "But, can't we just tell him I'm repairing it and then someone more capable actually does it when the time is right?" Draco asked worriedly. Dumbledore fixed him with a hardened stare. "It is my belief that the truth is generally preferable to lies." Draco's eyes flew wide. "We're literally lying to them, but pretending to kill you." Dumbledore smiled. "And the best of us sometimes eat our words. Nevertheless, it shall make an interesting and enlightening NAWT-level project for yourself and Miss Granger. The two of you are amongst the brightest of the year. I am certain that you will do well. But to make sure that your work is on the right track, you shall check in with your heads of house on occasion, and let them know your progress." Sirius Black spoke up. "When do you foresee this happening, Professor Dumbledore? When are we putting this plan into motion?" "I imagine it will take some time for Mr. Malfoy and Miss Granger to work out repairing the Vanishing Cabinet. Severus may need a little bit of time to brew the proper potions, and Harry and I have a few things that need to be discussed before I go into hiding. Not to mention, a headmaster dying is likely to disrupt our students' education greatly. Better that it happens near the end of term, I think." March 1997. Remarkably, Richard's plan to distract the Dark Lord with a business venture seemed to be working. Jugson proved to be quite good at marketing, and the Fixer Elixir hit shop shelves with a bang. Sales soared, and Richard was beginning to regret his spur-of-the-moment idea. The MI6 R&D team did not disappoint. The concoction they made was tasty. The vaguely fruity, sugary drink appealed to nearly every taste bud, and Jugson's eye-catching and engaging adverts ensured that the drink had an exciting launch. By March, it was flying off the shelves, and Jugson was delirious with glee that his advertising campaign was going so well. Richard could not say the same, as he had to provide Voldemort with weekly updates on their progress. He found himself becoming a reluctant expert in things like market share, working capital, and quarterly earnings futures. As a dentist, it had never been his intention to develop a sugary drink. He was now having to ask his patients if they had recently taken up the habit of drinking Fixer Elixir, based upon their new cavities and developing gingivitis. During every meeting, Richard at least took modest pleasure in noting Bellatrix's anger at the whole situation. She telegraphed her thoughts clearly to anyone who looked at her. Richard could tell that she saw this as yet another stupid straw, at which the Dark Lord was grasping. Discussing his predicament he found himself in with Lobo, Sirius, and Tonks one evening over beers at Grimmauld Place, Richard shook his head ruefully. "I suppose it's my own fault. I suggested the sodding drink. How was I to know that this dumb idea was going to result in me being the one to successfully shill sugary syrup to the masses?" Lobo chuckled lightly. "Well, at least the money you are generating is going to a good cause. McGonagall and Dumbledore have set up an excellent Muggleborn integration program at the school. Current and future Muggleborns will find it far easier to commingle with Wizarding Society from here on out. Just let that be your quantum of solace." The burst of laughter from the four of them was at direct odds with the dreary surroundings of the Black House. "That was a good one, Lobo," Richard said. April 1997. Draco and Hermione found themselves in front of the Vanishing Cabinet, in the room of requirement for what felt like the 100th time since January. It had been an exhausting process. In addition to needing to repair the physical cabinet, they also needed to correct the broken magic within the cabinet. It had proven quite difficult, requiring knowledge of several obscure ancient runes, as well as an extensive understanding of charms. It truly would have been an excellent NEWT-level project, they both thought, if the circumstances had been less dire. The two of them had taken it upon themselves to contact Mr. Borgin, at Borgin and Burke, the shop in Nocturne Alley where the twin of the Vanishing Cabinet was located. Draco emphasized that Borgin should not sell the other Vanishing Cabinet, and should be available for testing when the time came. Hermione gave him a coin like the one she had created for Dumbledore's army, so that they could communicate with the man when the time was right. Draco kept his father updated on the Vanishing Cabinet as well, and Lucius, in turn, told Voldemort and the other Death Eaters. It was decided that, when the time came, Lucius would not go to Hogwarts with the invasion party, owing to the fact that he was on the Board of Governors and could not be seen appearing to conspire in the death of Albus Dumbledore. Hermione and Draco were both anxious for the time to come, and dreading when it would. Despite their best efforts, the cabinet was proving difficult to repair. Every test so far had yielded either no results or the very worst of results. Time seemed to work differently inside the cabinet. This was in line with what Grant Montague had reported. His ramblings had gotten better over the months, but he was still afflicted with night terrors, and had not been able to resume his studies at Hogwarts. Still, Draco remembered visiting the wizard in the infirmary before he was sent to St. Mungo's for long-term care. Montague had talked about how time seemed to stretch, to loop back, to twist and turn in on itself like a ball of string, impossibly snarled. The first few tests, nothing happened. Once they started to try various charms, things began to happen, but they weren't always good things. They tried sending through a glass of milk. It came back solid, yellowed and cracking. They tried sending an apple. The mushy brown ooze that returned smelled like the inside of a skip. Hermione dreaded the moment that they would need to send a living test subject through it. Draco vaguely wondered if they could capture Mrs. Norris. "Draco, that's awful," Hermione admonished. "Would you rather send through your ferret?" Draco asked. "Leave Houdini out of this." But improving in their venture they were, and whether they liked it or not, the time was drawing nigh. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.